Kirk, no change, has been abysmal the last few weeks. 4 picks will get the boys buzzing. That'll get...
Yes, it will.
Penix in a game or two could be in there.
Might be time for Penix and new coaches in the ATL.
The Atlanta Falcons came under a lot of scrutiny in the offseason when they decided to pay Kirk Cousins a significant contract and then spend a top 10 pick on Michael Penix Jr. And now looking back at it, I think we can understand why, because it seems like Kirk Cousins isn't nearly the quarterback he once was for the Minnesota Vikings. And the Michael Penix Jr. could start much quicker than we thought. So before we get to the content, we are less than 20,000 subscribers away from getting to 1 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help our channel get there. And now that we get all of that out of the way, break! We had so much success on Thanksgiving with the Prize Picks free square. If you follow me on Instagram, then you would have seen my pick of Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, and David Montgomery, which hit for a 5x return. Our square of Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane also converted. And my favorite part about this is getting DMs like this. One of my followers made $225 out of my picks on Thanksgiving. And I got many more DMs of you guys hitting with my picks as well. If you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, click on my link in the description or use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. We're going to be making picks for the rest of the season for the NBA and NFL, and I give away my picks for free on Instagram and Snapchat. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Kirk Cousins has had a very interesting 2 years. I mean, after playing for the Minnesota Vikings last year in the 2023 season, where he was on track for a MVP-like season, he suffered a tragic Achilles tear, which would end his final season with the Minnesota Vikings and force him to enter free agency, coming off of one of the most serious injuries you could sustain as a NFL player at the age of 36. Now, the Atlanta Falcons have been searching for a quarterback since the end of the Matt Ryan era, and they were very aggressive in trying to acquire said quarterback. They signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million contract, which I applauded them for, because I understand you could get caught up in the numbers and say,
oh my God, how did Kirk Cousins get big money once again in his second free agency?
When you consider the fact that Kirk Cousins got paid as the 12th highest paid quarterback in the NFL this past offseason, then this contract is a steal. If Kirk Cousins got paid top 5 QB money, then we'd be having a completely different conversation here. But Kirk Cousins is getting paid less than Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Tua, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and as much as Patrick Mahomes. And so if Kirk Cousins is even able to slightly extend his career to his late 30s, then this could be one of the best contracts in the entire NFL for the Atlanta Falcons. The problem is that Kirk Cousins had a lot to overcome in order to get there, and the Atlanta Falcons didn't seem super confident in his abilities to get there. On one hand, he suffered an Achilles tear in his right leg, which is significant because when you're a quarterback, you're planting on that right leg to drive the power of your throws, and this will become very significant later on. This isn't like Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tear, where he tore his Achilles on his left leg, but in the case of the Atlanta Falcons, they had two choices. They either could have gone all in on this Kirk Cousins era, where Kirk Cousins was coming into an offense with a brand new head coach, a pretty solid wide receiver core with Darnell Mooney and Drake London, a tight end that is perennially poised to break out each and every season in Kyle Pitts, a solid rushing tandem with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So they could have used a top 10 pick to potentially get Kirk Cousins additional help, a player such as Rome Odunze. And that's actually what the Chicago Bears were expecting, but the Atlanta Falcons surprised everybody when they decided to take Michael Penix Jr. This became memed in the NFL community last April, and rightfully so. How do you go and sign a quarterback to a 4-year, $180 million contract, an individual that was poised for an MVP-like season last year, and instead of getting him additional help, you decide to take your QB of the future at number 8. Not only do you select him at number 8, but you select the oldest quarterback taken in the first round. Michael Penix Jr. is 24. So by the time Kirk Cousins' contract contract expired, Michael Penix Jr. would have been 28 years old. I understand the philosophy because the NFL truly has a quarterback development problem right now. These quarterbacks are coming from very simple offenses in college football and are expected to carry the burden of a significantly more difficult brand of football almost immediately, and some of them never make it. Some of them do make it, but a few years later. I mean, take a look at what happened to Bryce Young this year. We made a video on him a few days ago. During the trade deadline, a lot of people were speculating that Bryce Young was going to get traded, but thankfully the Carolina Panthers stood firm in their belief that Bryce Young could develop into a solid QB, and he's had a remarkable stretch of games over the past 4 games. The Falcons probably took inspiration from what happened with the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love and wanted to replicate it with Michael Penix Jr. The problem was the age and the execution of it all. Jordan Love was 21 years old when he was drafted, and the Packers already had Aaron Rodgers on the roster. This video of the Falcons general manager explaining himself to Arthur Blank went absolutely viral on draft day. And there's even a video of Bears general manager Ryan Poles being surprised that he didn't even need to trade up to take Rome Odunze.
My gut tells me it's Rome. Penix. Shane, you okay with this?
But regardless, the Falcons went into this season with the most hope that they've had in a very long time, and Kirk Cousins definitely brought some swagger to the team.
My teammate used to say, walk into your trap, take over your trap, was the line he would say. And so that's kind of what it is. You go into someone else's stadium and you try to assert yourself. That's what everybody's trying to do when they go on the road. It's hard to do, but that's certainly the goal.
But if you watched Kirk Cousins' games throughout the season, it was clear that he was making the right football plays, but the zip on his throws were gone. A huge reason being because he tore his right Achilles tendon. It's very difficult to drive the ball the way you once were able to do when your right leg isn't as strong as it once was. And this went largely ignored throughout the year because Kirk Cousins was still capable of delivering incredible performances. And I don't want us to forget that at all. He completely shifted the primetime Kirk Cousins narrative that was surrounding him, and he had dominant performances against the Philadelphia Eagles in week 2. He put up a great fight against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 3, and he quieted all of the skeptics when he threw for over 500 passing yards on Matt Ryan night versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and 4 touchdowns to boot. Once you see a quarterback throwing for over 500 passing yards, you really don't question things anymore. And for the most part, Falcons fans were happy because Kirk Cousins kept the Falcons competitive. But following their victory over the Dallas Cowboys, where Kirk Cousins threw for 3 touchdowns once again off of 80% completion percentage, things became very concerning. He threw for over 300 passing yards against the New Orleans Saints, but the Falcons would lose to the Saints. Then he had a horrific performance against the Denver Broncos, where he threw 1 interception and no touchdowns, but they lost 6-38. And this brought us to the worst game of Kirk Cousins' Falcons career. Now look, I'm not the type of guy that likes to make quick knee-jerk reactions to a player's horrible game, because bad games happen, and I like to evaluate whenever a player might need some more time getting acclimated to a new situation. But in the case of Kirk Cousins, that's not the problem. It's truly the fact that you could see his football abilities deteriorating, and you really saw this in a very winnable game where the Falcons faced off against the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, the Chargers only won because Kirk Cousins gave them the game. Literally, he threw for 4 interceptions and no touchdowns, and the interceptions were really concerning interceptions. The first pick was on the first play of the second quarter, and it was honestly the best pick of the game, which sounds insane. But Kirk Cousins double clutches before throwing a pass to the left sideline for Drake London and gets picked off by Tareeb Still. The rest of the interceptions in this game were very telling of Kirk Cousins' abilities, whether it came to reading the defense, making poor decisions, or just his physical ability straight up deteriorating. The one that was the most concerning to me was this pick 6. I mean, there was no zip on this ball, and when you take a look at when Kirk Cousins throws this ball, there's literally 2 defenders that have the ability to potentially get in front of it before Darnell Mooney can. I mean, the speed of which this ball travels is the equivalent to a paper airplane. But you might think this was the softest throw that Kirk Cousins threw the entire game, but unfortunately, it would get worse. On 3rd and goal from the Chargers' 13-yard line, Kirk Cousins would scramble out of pressure and then lob up a jump ball into the end zone where you clearly see more white jerseys than black jerseys, and it falls straight into the hands of Marcus May. And then his final interception of the game. The Falcons still have a chance at winning this game because the Falcons defense did a remarkable job shutting down the Chargers offense. Kirk Cousins would once again stare at his wide receiver, leading Derwin James into the right spot to pick him off for the fourth and final time of the day. It was these interceptions and the way that he was intercepted that really made me concerned about Kirk Cousins' long-term future as a NFL quarterback. And it's not very often that I look at a player and say that this guy might need to retire, because the deterioration I'm seeing in Kirk Cousins' physical abilities is very similar to what we saw in Peyton Manning's career in his final season in the NFL. When the Denver Broncos had to devise an offense where Peyton Manning would get to the line of scrimmage, would call the right play based off of what he saw from the defense, and usually would hand the ball off to CJ Anderson and ride a potent rushing attack, a generational defense, and the fact that Cam Newton was too terrified to jump on a loose ball in the Super Bowl all the way to his final Super Bowl victory. And this isn't a knock on Peyton Manning, it's just clear that Kirk Cousins has lost his physical abilities. In the case of Peyton Manning, he was still incredible at reading defenses, enough to the point where it was worth keeping him in the game in the final season of his career. In the case of Kirk Cousins, there's no zip on the ball, he's making horrible reads, and he literally lost the Falcons their last game. All of this is making me think that you're going to see Michael Penix start at quarterback as soon as this season, but if not this season, then certainly next season. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. When Kirk Cousins originally signed with the Falcons for this cheap, I was assuming that it may have been for a bridge QB role, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is that upset about it either. When you take a look at Kirk Cousins' career earnings given where he was drafted, this man has made $294 million throughout his career. This is despite being drafted in the 4th round of a NFL draft where his same team gave up multiple first-round picks to move up to the number 2 overall pick to select a QB. Kirk Cousins wasn't supposed to have a career like he has, and it's truly remarkable that he's been able to make the amount of money that he was able to. It's tragic because I really wonder what his career would have been like if he was fully healthy last year, because he seemed to have really been thriving in Kevin O'Connell's offense. The good news is that his contract isn't that much of an albatross for the Atlanta Falcons. There's a potential out following the 2026 season, so they could either cut him completely or they can keep him under contract as a veteran mentor to Michael Penix, which is what I think that they're going to do, at least for a year, because if you moved on from him following this season, then he'll incur a $65 million cap penalty just from cutting him. But if you waited until 2026, then it's not nearly as bad. It's $25 million. I don't necessarily know if there's a trade market for him either. That could also be something that the Falcons explore, but I don't know who would want to trade for Kirk Cousins given the tape that we've seen on him so far. At the end of the day, man, it was an incredible career, but I just don't see a way that he can turn this around. The injuries piled up, he had an Achilles tear, it diminished him of his physical attributes, but in my opinion, it's nothing to be ashamed of because he exceeded the expectations for his career. He set himself up for generational wealth, and at the very minimum, I think he'd be an incredible broadcaster because he has a lot of charisma. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about all this? Do you think it's time to move on to Michael Penix? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.